It really started after the Vincent Chin case in 1982, and I remember when Mrs. Chin realized, even though we had been successful in advocating for a federal civil rights hate crimes trial, when she realized that in the second federal trial that she had lost her quest for justice and decided to leave the United States, it really shook me, and it shook us to the core. And we really, at that moment, pledged not only to build a very strong regional organization at the Asian Pacific American Legal Center in Los Angeles, but we also believed that we needed a national organization.
We came together to establish the Asian American Justice Center because we saw a need for a national voice for an emerging community, for the Asian American community.
There were great groups on the ground. OCA, JCL, other national groups were doing a wonderful job, but their mandate was to work for a particular Asian American ethnic or nationality group. We needed a pan-Asian American group with legal training, with the ability to go and talk to people in Congress, at the various agencies, and frankly in the broader civil rights community here. And that's one thing that's been very exciting. We've had a big impact on the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and with many of our colleagues who are here in the DC area because we've been here and had a physical presence and we've had enough staff to do so.
We have a network of over 118 organizations in 30 states.
AAJC and the other national Asian American organizations in DC are all a part of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, and that coalition is really the leading coalition working on behalf of civil rights legislation.
So AAJC really plays that vital role to be our representative in front of all of the legislators and the White House in Washington, D.C., representing the voice and the needs of the AAPI communities that we could not do 3,000 miles away.
The great thing is that Asian American Justice Center built on the work that had been done before it. The Japanese American Citizens League, the work of the Asian American Legal Defense Fund, the work of the Asian Pacific American Legal Center, Stuart Quo in LA. They had been toiling in these vineyards for years. And yet they've often been toiling in very localized vineyards. And the creation of a national institution that brought these issues on behalf of Asian communities that weren't just focused on New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, but at the national level, was a critical entry of that new voice.
To me, it's one of, I think, the grants that I'm most proud of, our ability, not just Carnegie, but together with my colleagues at Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, to really understand the needs and opportunities that were facing the Asian Pacific American community and to be able to respond to it. In the early 1990s, we were seeing a spiking of violence. There had been some back in the 80s. I mentioned Vincent Chin in 1982, but there had been many other incidences where there were harassment and other things that did not actually escalate into a killing or a crime. But there was a lot of what we called anti-Asian violence, which was verbal assaults and other things that could escalate into a crime.
In order to have a federal or state response to hate violence, you have to know the nature and magnitude of the problem. And Napalsi's early work, and then it became AAJC, was critically important in helping to set that foundation. And it really played a role in helping us to pass a number of state laws, and in 2009, after a long 15-year struggle, the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act.
1996 was when the first iteration of that bill was introduced. Karen and the team were there back in 96. They were there in 97 and every year thereafter, because civil rights is indeed about persistence. And Karen has so many qualities, not the least of which is she is persistent. And that day in October of 2009, when the president signed that law, it was a red letter day for all of us.
One of the most difficult issues for people of any background is affirmative action. It's a buzzword that gets people all riled up.
Litigation became just very hard, not impossible, but a very hard way to seek social justice. And it was in that context and in that background, with a energized court seeking to reverse years and years of real gains of both employment and educational opportunity using affirmative action as an important strategy that brought us together to form Americans for a Fair Chance.
AAJC has set the record straight and has asked, what are the actual facts about the up-by-your-bootstrap stories? Yes, we should admire the Asian immigrants who have done so much to succeed, to overcome every obstacle without believing that it's due to some ancient Oriental secret or that that example can be used against other groups.
One of the areas that I've most valued working with Karen and AAJC in is the issue of adult English language learning. And I have to say that Karen has been such a fantastic national leader on this issue. She was one of the people who was there on the issue very early, and she was working very hard both at the local community level, up through the state level, and to the federal level.
The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act was that piece of legislation that President Clinton vetoed twice before he signed. And the reason we were so upset about it was because it swept into it as a way of paying for it, cuts to legal immigrants and refugees. And so a group of us got together, National Council of La Raza, Asian American Justice Center, Catholic Bishops Conference, United Jewish Communities, Jewish Federations of North America, and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. We were going to figure out a way, this group, to get some of those benefits restored. And in the end, in less than a year, we not only got $9 billion restored, we got $14.5 billion restored.
It's easy,
important, confidential,
and your participation is vital.
To learn more, visit the Asian American Justice Center's census website at asianamericancensus.org.
AAJC has been working on census for over a decade. For Census 2010, we were proud to be able to provide resources to 26 local and regional community-based organizations in 18 states, as well as 9 national AAPI partners in our national AA and HPI census campaign.
We continue that work on issues such as redistricting, where we're working with local partners to ensure that the lines that have been drawn are fair. We are monitoring very closely voter identification laws that are making it more difficult for people to vote, and partnering with people to help provide technical assistance. We also are very involved in immigration policy work and advocacy. This is one of the areas that AAJC has been known for a very long time.
AAJC was instrumental in helping to secure legal immigration status for the Thai workers who were enslaved and working behind barbed wire and under armed guard in an apartment complex in 1995.
AAJC played such a crucial role in making sure that members of Congress and their staff were really aware of the impact that our immigration legislations have on the Asian American community.
The creation of the Rights Working Group was a critical aspect of the advocacy that happened after September 11, 2001. And Rights Working Group continues to be a really important partner for many organizations such as SALT, because they're able to both do advocacy at the national level on issues such as racial and religious profiling or immigration enforcement, as well as maintain field work and support field organizing at the local level so that community members, especially those who are most affected, can raise their voices.
AAJC also played an important role in one of the greatest successes of the modern civil rights era and of the Leadership Conference, and that was the 2006 reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. You know, the Voting Rights Act is the most important of the nation's civil rights laws, and to have AAJC play a leading role in working with other members of the coalition to establish a strategy and to establish an approach to the reauthorization of the Act is something commendable, for which they deserve great credit.
NAPABA's Judiciary Committee worked with the Asian American Justice Center to help educate Asian Pacific Americans about the judicial nominations process. We tried to identify and recruit talented young lawyers who wanted to serve in the federal judiciary, and we helped guide individuals throughout the nominations process. Our joint efforts paid off, and there are now 14 Asian Pacific American Article III federal judges in the United States, including 1 circuit court judge.
The way in which Asian Pacific Americans are portrayed determines to a large extent the way they're perceived by policymakers and by the public. And if you only see Asian Americans as Chinese waiters and geisha girls and so forth, those kind of stereotypical limited roles, you're not going to see them as full partners in American society. You're going to tend to see them as foreigners or as an exotic and not as regular Americans. The Asian Pacific American Media Coalition was formed, which comprised of many different Asian organizations, including the Asian American Justice Center, the NAACP, the National Hispanic Media Council, and the American Indians for Film and Television all got together.
As a result of that, all the networks have initiatives that are in the books that have created these pipeline programs
to force the networks to address diversity issues.
I'm proud to have had a role, along with AAJC, in leading the Asian Pacific American Media Coalition. Through AAJC's media diversity work, the number of AAPIs on primetime television has increased significantly, both in front of and behind the camera.
In the 1990s, the Clinton Race Initiative was going on, and many people were starting to talk about a specific executive order that would create the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. At that time, I was working actually at the Department of Health and Human Services, and it was many of the health advocacy organizations that were really pushing for President Clinton to sign that executive order. At the end of the Clinton administration, in those first years of the first White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, we definitely appreciated the partnership and the work and the advocacy of AAJC and Karen and her whole entire team.
I'm proud that we partner with the Asian American Justice Center as a part of the Broadband Opportunities Coalition. And that coalition focuses on broadband expansion and broadband adoption and broadband utilization. In effect, ensuring that communities of color are connected to and also achieve the opportunities that the internet and broadband expansion provide. Throughout, Karen and the Asian American Justice Center have been an indispensable voice in ensuring that this expansion is inclusive of all communities.
We're really talking about 4 organizations that have worked closely together for almost 20 years.
The objective here is that we could create, through the tremendous resources that we currently have, an organization that would have immediate recognition and credibility.
The work that AAJC does is imperative to ensuring that AAPIs continue to have a seat at the table at all tiers of government. They have a great reputation backed up by strong networks and relationships, so they are able to open doors and make sure the community's concerns get heard.
I'm pleased that AAJC, over its 2 decades of existence, has also had an extraordinary commitment to building a more diverse America. AAJC and its leadership recognize what we in the Leadership Conference have long known, and that is, in diversity there is strength. AAJC has been committed to building a diverse coalition of national organizations committed to the common goal of perfecting America and making it a more perfect union.